Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's Control+M Presents Plex session. It's our bi-weekly free training sessions for everyone in the Plex community to help you grow your Plex knowledge. Welcome our Ken Keller, who we're so happy to have on our team. Ken's been working with Plex since about 2004, and in addition to being an all-around great guy, he's got unbelievable depth and experience in manufacturing processes in all different industries. He's going to share with you today ways that he's seen folks use different Plex portal offerings. So Ken, I won't steal any more of your thunder. Looking forward to your session today, so take it away.
All right, thanks, Patty. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Typically, I call in and use phone audio. I'm using laptop audio today. So if I start to sound a little distant, just raise your hand, let us know, and I'll see what I can do about that. But again, welcome everyone. Again, my name is Ken Keller. Thanks, Patty, for that introduction. Those of you that have met me before know that it's all about Ken. My first slide today is going to be about Ken. I'm a fisherman by hobby. My wife and I fish a lot, and just a statistic jumped out at me when I was thinking about this presentation. 80% of all fish caught are caught by 20% of the fishermen and women. And why is that? Well, I was a hobby fisherman and caught maybe every 2 or 3 times I'd go fishing, I would catch a fish. And there is another saying that says a bad day of fishing beats a good day of work every time. But anyway, what made me a better fisherman was having the right tools and knowing how to use those tools. So the more I fished, the more I would get the tools in my tackle box and enable me to catch big fish. So what you're seeing there on the screen, I'm just proud. I'm showing off. But that's my personal best bass that I caught a couple weeks ago. With that, what is a portal? How do they work? I'll give you some examples in this call. Why should I use them? And how do I secure them? And are these tools that I can put into my toolbox so that I can catch more fish, achieve better results, and achieve bigger and better? So what is a portal? Portals are applications or screens in Plex which provide limited access to either a supplier user, a customer user, or an employee. There are also other portals in Plex like the developer portal, but for this presentation, we're going to talk about suppliers, customers, and employee portals. For you classic users, you can note that you can really add any screen to a portal menu in classic. However, the screen that you choose to put in those portal menus may not all be portal secured. And as you saw from the agenda, we're going to talk about security today. In UX, there are specific portal menus which contain all of the screens that Plex has already portal enabled and secured for you. So in UX, you got a little bit of an advantage there, and I'm going to talk about that today in this presentation. Primarily, we'll be talking about the US applications, because if you're not using UX, you should at least be talking about it internally, and this may be another reason to go that route. So how do portals work? Again, those are portal-enabled screens. They limit the filter options. So let's say you're a supplier, a customer, an employee. What makes all portal-enabled screens alike is that they each have, at least in the filter field, a supplier field, a customer field, or an employee field. And those are only applicable to the logged-in user. So Plex recognizes the user, recognizes either them as an employee, recognizes the user either as they are associated with a supplier or a customer, and then prevents that logged in user from seeing other supplier, customer, or employee data. You may have noted this either in Classic or UX, that when you do a menu search, and when you do a menu search, you're likely hitting Control+M, correct? To do a menu search. And let's say we're going to look for the inventory tracking screens, which in UX is the inventory screen. You may have noted that the paths that are presented, the search results that come back, might show that screen in different menus, in different menu nodes in Classic. And you're likely choosing one or the other, but it's the same screen. And what I'm showing here there is a search result for the word inventory, and you'll see it shows up in Customer Portal, in Inventory Control, and also in the Supplier Portal. So those that are in the Customer Portal and the Supplier Portal in UX are customer and supplier enabled portal screens that, if I am a customer or a supplier user, would limit what I could see. So it's already set up for you in UX. The other image that I'm showing here is what that filter would look like. In this case, a supplier user would log into the inventory screen, and if they were associated with supplier ABC, that would be defaulted, grayed out, so that we could not select another supplier and maybe see their inventory. So if I'm using IAM to set up a generic supplier account, we want to make sure that you select the proper account type, because in order for a portal user to be associated with a supplier or a customer, we're going to have to do that in the user manager or in IAM in their account. So in this case, I'd like, especially from a supplier standpoint and customers as well, when you set up the user or the account, make the last name supplier or make the last name customer, because when you're looking at the user manager list, then all of your suppliers are going to show up together because they have the first name, or excuse me, the last name supplier. Because if you've ever noted, the user manager screen does sort by last name. Or if we're a customer, the last family name would be customer. The given name or first name would be the actual name of that customer or supplier. So using this example, I've got a supplier account that I'm setting up. I'm calling that supplier, last name supplier, first name ABC. I give them a Plex username. And in this case, follow your current nomenclature, your current method for applying a Plex username. I happen to like putting the first name, ABC, last name, supplier, dot, in our case, CMS for our PCN or whatever your company code is. Input a Plex password here, and then check the proper account type. So if this was a customer account that you are adding, you would select the customer box. In this case, it's supplier, so we're selecting the supplier account type, or you could select the employee if they are an employee of your organization. Next, we're going to create a security role for portal access only. So I would go to my security roles manager screen. I would create a security role called Supplier Portal. And you see that I have some flags here to check. I would check the supplier allowed flag for a supplier portal. If I was adding a customer portal role that's going to be used with a customer, I would select the customer allowed. Want to make sure that we don't select the security auditor to give them full rights and ability. But in the notes section, I always say used for supplier portal or customer portal. But if we do it this way, I'm going to show you here in a moment how we can segregate. So security roles for portals can be segregated from other roles in the security roles manager. And in order to see them, actually, you have to select either the supplier allowed or the customer allowed flags to see those roles. And then the other nice thing about UX, and this, like I said, this is just a big advantage to using UX, is the ability to search by portal type, either by supplier portal, customer portal, or employee portal. Once we have added the security roles, we can then assign actions to that portal role. In this case, a supplier portal role. The actions are assigned to the supplier portal, in this case, in the security manager. And again, that helpful hint, you've used the portal type filter. And if we just search simply by supplier portal type, I would see every module every action and action type associated with screens that are a part of the supplier portal. So in one action, in one step, I could actually secure the entire supplier portal. So what we would do is, in this case, I've filtered it by module group in purchasing. So if we're going to use the supplier portal, let's say for online releases, I could go to the module group, filter on purchasing, the portal type, supplier, add the action roles to the selected actions. In this case, the ability to add a supplier acknowledgement or the ability to add a supplier release, and then assign the proper security role. In this case, the supplier portal security role that we just added. So that would then secure, but you could just run this wide open on a portal type called supplier portal type, and then assign all of those actions to that role. And then once you add your users that are suppliers, they would all have access to only the supplier portal screens. So now that we've set up an account, now that we've set up a security role called supplier and customer portal, on the user details screen in the user manager, we're going to want to add positions and departments for the generic supplier user. And I use that word generic supplier user because we're not managing individual names within those suppliers. We're just giving them one user with the first name of the supplier, the last name of supplier, and they can pass that around and use that. We're going to assign a position called supplier, a department called supplier, and then link the supplier code. In most PCNs, there will already be a supplier and customer position and department. Plex has typically set that up in those tables in just about every PCN I've ever noted. But assigning a supplier or a customer code to the portal users that you're creating is really what makes the portal work and really what the portal is. There are some decisions that you'll want to make, and I'm just going to give you some things that I've found over the years that I think are helpful and beneficial. But you're going to want to decide if you want your portal user to be required to add or manage their own passwords. When I was doing this as a Plex customer and managing supplier portal users, I really didn't want them to manage their own passwords. I would give them their initial password and say, use this password always. The last thing you want to do is set all this up and then have your suppliers constantly contacting you because they can't log in because somebody's changed a password. So do not check the forced password change and then just tell them to use whatever password you've given them, and that's the password they should use forever and ever. I like to give the portal user the initial passwords and then manage it for them, and then tell them they can share it. It's their data that's going to be returned in the supplier portal, so they can share it amongst whoever they want in their organization. So you only need one user. Plex does allow for that same user to be logged in more than once at a time, so they could have 2 people or 3 people logged in at the same time under the same user. If you will use automated emails with the supplier, add the email or other contact information there. This is where it gets a little trickier because if some of the notifications use the user rather than a contact, you may be limited to the one generic user email or phone number that you assign. But assign the proper security role here in the user details screen. And in this case, it's that supplier portal security role that we created along with all those assigned applications and actions. If the user is assigned to a customer supplier code, only customer or supplier allowed roles will be shown. So the way we set up our initial contact in supplier portal role, we'll just only show the one security role. So for your IT folks that are likely, or your administrators that are likely setting up these contacts in users of the supplier portal, we'll only have one security role to give to them based upon whether or not it's a supplier or a customer. So what are portals? I think we can say that it's not a module per se, and you've seen that before. A portal really is just access to screens. And in Classic, we just assign access to menus. But in UX, there are specific portal menus that you can find in your main menu. So if we go to the main menu and we open that up, you'll see down there at the bottom, we have an employee portal, a supplier portal, and a customer portal. So looking at the supplier portal menu, we have requirements and shipping, product data management, supplier tooling, a document control system. These are all integrated portal-enabled screens and menus, so that if we've given access to the supplier portal, which we just did in the prior screens, to a supplier, we're going to be able to, they're going to be able to access those screens and utilize them. And this is really what it's all about. What's in the portal and what can be done? What tools can I put in my tackle box? What bait can I use to catch more fish? So I'm going to click into the requirements and shipping, just show you some of the ability that exists within supplier portal menus. Some you may have known about, some maybe not. But when it comes to requirements and shipping, there is a supplier planning schedule. So if there are, let's say, purchase order releases out there and purchase order due dates, your supplier can manage those via access of the supplier portal. They can see all of the open releases. They can see all of those due dates. More importantly, they can actually respond in using this online releases to suppliers. You can actually release those to the supplier. The supplier can acknowledge through the online release screen, sending you automatic email notifications that they acknowledge receipt. So we're now starting to eliminate some emails and phone calls, and that's what really this is going to be about. They can acknowledge, and they can even label and ship inventory directly to you. So fulfilling those purchase order requirements so that you don't have to label when you receive or finalize receipt. You can see some other screens here that are actually really cool and maybe underutilized. But if you do subcontracting, you can actually, through the portal, have your subcontract supplier ship from subcontract. So all you have to do is then receive, and all the rest of it's been taken care of for you. Again, they can label directly. And so all you're doing is receiving from receiving into your inventory because it's already shipped from subcontract and fulfilled those requirements. Or there's a drop ship to customer node here, which would allow that, so if you do drop shipping after subcontracting, your subcontracting supplier could use the portal to actually ship directly to the customer when they are truly shipping. And they can use the labeled inventory screen to label this inventory with your labels coming right out of your PCN. And again, depleting inventory with all the bells and whistles that you already have when you do customer shipping or truck shipping, which you'll also find in the supplier portal. So some amazing screens and abilities here. And we're just looking at one of the supplier portal menus called requirements and shipping in the supplier portal. We're going to look at another called production quality. And I know we've got some food and beverage folks on the call right now, but in production quality, maybe we give access to problem control, or maybe we give access to SPC check sheets. So a supplier could see the receiving inspection that's being done. A supplier could respond to problem controls. And for the most part, I think that's where I see customers using Supplier Portal is one, notification to the supplier that a problem has occurred. And maybe that problem is linked to a supplier return as well, and they respond to it via the portal. Maybe the return is part of a failed check sheet that you did at receiving inspection. They can receive the results of that receiving inspection here as well in the portal. And then finally, I think most importantly for this call, if you do use the supplier portal, I think this is maybe the handiest piece of it. Allow your suppliers to self-service manage. Once you get them set up in the portal with an account, with a user, with the security role assigned to the various applications and actions that we showed before, you can allow the supplier to self-service their own screens. So in the case of contacts, we talked about the user having a generic user, but maybe we have 20 contacts that we use for billing, shipping, quality, all those different functions that we interact with a supplier on a daily basis maybe. Allow them to add those contacts into Plex. All they're going to see and have the ability to do is add a contact that is associated with them as a supplier, because what the portal really is at its heart is that grayed out supplier field or employee field in a portal enabled screen that restricts and doesn't allow the supplier to add or edit or even view data that is associated with another supplier or another customer or another employee. But in the supplier self-service, they can add their own contacts, because the last thing you want to do is manage their attrition and their turnover. So think back just maybe in the last few years, how many times you've added a new contact for a quality manager for a supplier. Well, if they lose their quality manager, they can drill into their own portal and add the new contact here. You don't have to worry about that. Supplier quality management is another piece of this. And for you food and beverage folks, many of you may already be using this, but maybe not using it in the portal. So this supplier quality management allows us to, for each supplier, add a quality certification. In this case, maybe SQF or gluten-free or kosher or non-GMO, and then have an associated expiration date. There are various reports in Plex and automated email notifications that can be used to allow us to manage these. So we can send notifications to someone in your organization that says, hey, ABC Supplier's SQF quality code is getting ready to expire on March 1st, 2021. Maybe you get that email 60 days in advance so that you can contact the supplier and say, hey, we need your new SQF certificate, and we need to attach it here. Using the supplier portal, that notification can go directly to your supplier 60 days in advance of the expiration date on March 1st, and they can attach their own certificate. Now the only thing you have to worry about is when they're past due and it hasn't done, and hasn't been done, and there are notifications for that too. So we're putting that work back on the supplier to manage their own certifications, their own problems, all those things that you spend time sending emails and phone calls back and forth to your supplier contacts. And speaking of supplier contacts, this is what I was talking about for allowing them to add their own suppliers. You'll see that the contact type is defaulted to supplier. The supplier is defaulted to whoever the logged in user is associated with. And they can just add as many suppliers, supplier contacts as they'd like. They can choose any category if they wish, but don't manage their people. Let them do it. That's what I would say. Let's look at some additional supplier portal menus. Inventory. If your supplier is contacting you and wants to know what they have in inventory, they can see it here. Whether or not you've received something, they can see it there in your inventory. Supplier performance, if you have supplier scorecards, things like that. Now, supplier scorecards do not automatically send out of Plex. What they do is they send you a notification that the supplier scorecard has been created for that time period. And then they say, okay, you can now log into Plex. They don't actually send the scorecard. So if you want your suppliers to automatically, one, know that the supplier scorecard has been created, and two, for them to view it, the supplier portal is the way to go for that. Otherwise, you're emailing those supplier scorecards that are generating out of Plex. We can have folders and document control system assigned to suppliers and such. Let's talk a little bit about customer portal menus, some examples of use of customer portal. The customer portal setup is just like it was for the supplier example that I gave. The only difference being it would be the user, the generic user, would be associated with a customer rather than a supplier, and they would be given a customer portal security role with all the applicable actions and applications. And if so, this is what they would see. They would be able to see AR invoices, customer purchase orders. They could actually add their own orders. So in lieu of customer EDI, they could actually add their own orders into your system if you trusted them enough and wanted to give them that access. They could see their own inventory. So if your customers are contacting you to say, hey, what's the status of X number, X part, and is it in WIP? Are you making it? Are you going to hit your due dates? Whatever it is, they can see that here in the customer portal. If you also wanted your customers to be able to generate RMA, so rather than give you a phone call and say, hey, we're sending some stuff back to you, and then, kicking off that project or that process, maybe with workflow, you could just simply have the customer add it right into your system and then use workflow to manage, or not. You could use the standard email notifications. But anyway, problem control. So they could, if you would allow, and I actually did this as a Plex customer, we allowed our primary customer to be able to add problems in our problem control system because they had their own problem control system, which they would assess points and demerits and things like that. Well, we aligned our problem control system with theirs, and it allowed the customer to just log into a customer portal and add the problem, and then we would take off with the 8D or 5P problem solving and containment actions and corrective actions. So a good example for there is an RMA. Again, we can use the automated email notifications or workflow to reduce or eliminate your own internal emails and phone calls. In this case, we're giving the Artie's Autos, a customer, the ability to access the RMA screen. They only are able to add or edit or see customer returns that they have added to the system. And then next is the employee portal menu. And in the employee portal, again, we're giving that employee the access to their own records. So if this employee has, let's say 2 weeks of vacation or 80 hours of vacation a year, and they want to know how many days vacation or hours of vacation do I have left, they can use the employee portal, click on time off management, and actually see the number of hours that they have left. They can also use this to request their own time off. They can also, if you assess points or demerits for being late or other actions, they can actually view their points in the point system. You can give them access to certain fields in the employee detail screen so that the employee can add their own emergency contacts, or maybe if they change their address, they can add a new address. That's going to be a little more security, maybe down to the field level, but it's all possible within the employee portal. So this is an example of employee expenses. You can see how, again, this works. As long as I have access to the employee portal as an employee, and I look at my employee expenses screen in the employee menu, Plex will gray out the employee field in the filter so that I can only see my records, and then I can manage the rest of it and actually see my expenses over a time period. And I would only see mine as the logged in user. How do I secure portals? So we talked a little bit about the integrated or security that already exists in UX. I do want to add that Vision Plex allows for securing via customer or supplier code on user details records. So if you have any Vision Plex reports, those can be added to portals, especially easily in Classic, and we can take that customer or supplier field on those must exist actually on the report, but if they do exist, we can do the wire up to secure by customer or supplier, essentially making it a portal report at that point. We can also use the security manager to determine applications, action types like edit, delete, add, allowed for that customer or supplier role. So, and I recommend this actually for setting up security for anyone, especially in UX. It's very easy. If we wanted to, for example, restrict the ability to delete anything in Plex, it's as simple as using the filter in the security manager, choosing the delete action type, and then your Plex is going to return all of the actions with the delete type, and then you can state which security role can do that or not. So we just stated that we could add a security role just for the supplier portal, but if we wanted to remove the ability to delete things, it's as simple as doing what's described here. So next is, why should I use portals? And I'm going to answer a question with a question or a series of questions. So why should I use portals? You know, my question would be, why are you doing the work for your suppliers? The portal is going to allow your suppliers to add their own contacts, to manage their own attrition and turnover, to input their own orders, or, you know, acknowledge their own orders. My other question would be, does it sometimes feel like you're babysitting? Just simply sitting at your desk answering phones and emails for people asking questions about their own data? And how much time do you spend sending emails or making phone calls to suppliers and customers for information that is already in Plex? And most importantly, you know, how much time do you spend answering questions with information that you can easily find in Plex? So just give access to your suppliers and customers for applicable functions and features, and allow them that same access. So to free your time up to do the important things. And then more importantly, why not? If you can secure this thing, and if you can train your supplier or customer to use some of the various screens that we've talked about here, why not use it? And that's usually the big question. All right, so I'm going to open it up for questions now. That's my presentation. Any questions?
Ken, you've got a question from Heidi Capinos in the chat. If you want to take a peek at that, maybe read it to the class and share.
If I can here, hold on just a second.
If you can't read it, I'll share it.
I have too many screens open here, Patty.
Okay, I can read it to you. Heidi asked, do the online releases to supplier records display within the PO itself? And if you need clarification, Heidi, you can go ahead and unmute and share your question.
Yeah, on the release.
Okay, I guess my question is if they would acknowledge that PO, that doesn't show up in the purchase order at all in that acknowledgement section, correct?
It should, because they would have the same access.
So if they're doing it in the online supplier release and they click that acknowledge checkbox, I tried it and I don't see anything showing up on the purchase order header in the acknowledgement section to show that the PO is acknowledged within the purchase order screen.
Acknowledged by the supplier.
Correct.
I believe that can be done. It just may not be done from the online releases. We may have to give them access if they don't have access to to their own purchase orders. That might be part of the issue.
So what does the online release acknowledgement screen do other than send an email? It doesn't really do anything other than send the email?
Yeah, it sends emails saying that they acknowledge. Yeah.
Okay.
I do see now, Patty, I'm in here now. Thank you, Heidi. But I see one from Jennifer Lawson. Is the employee portal available in Classic? And it is, Jennifer. It doesn't look like what I showed here using my UX examples, but we can create an employee portal that simply holds the screens that you want to include in the employee portal, like time off tracking, employee expenses, etc. And the security works very similarly. So you would create a menu node, let's say, called the employee portal, add your screens in there, and as long as they have the employee field on them, and it's possible, it's one of those things that is available in the portal system, meaning it's portal secured. We can absolutely do that in Classic.
Any other questions for Ken?
I have one. This is Heidi again. I have one more question. Sorry to be a pain.
Oh,
So-
you never are.
With the supplier portal again, with the self-service section with the contacts,
Yes.
I thought there was, so if we give the suppliers access to add and update their contact information, if they move those contacts around up and down in different orders, doesn't a certain contact have to be listed first? I think it's like if you want them to auto send to the purchase orders.
Yeah,
So
we would have to be careful about the contact categories, especially.
Okay.
So what I've done is allow them the ability to add the names and the contact info, emails and phone numbers, and then we would manage the categories or the order in which they're added. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a permission to change that order? Because I couldn't find one, because if you give them access to add they can go in and they can rearrange them without you really even knowing about it.
Are you using Classic, Heidi?
Yes, we
or
are in
UX?
Classic.
Okay, yeah. I'll have to take a look at that for you in Classic. I know in UX that it's I think they handle that differently, and I think it's taken care of for you in UX. So what you're asking for, I guess, is fixed in UX, to put it that way. But let me look into that for you, and I can get back with you on that. Is that all right?
Okay, because we've just started using the supplier portal, and that was one thing that we didn't want to turn on because we didn't want them screwing up when we send out purchase orders.
Okay.
Via email, then they won't go to the right person.
It makes sense. That makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And this is Mark with US Waffle.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, a question for you on the vendor portal. If an item you have a primary and a secondary supplier, how does that kind of impact this? In other words, does a supplier, do the two suppliers see your inventory balance? Obviously, it must be hard to indicate who supplied what when you're ordering the same item number from two different suppliers.
That's a real good point. So yeah, that would likely require some inventory management to do such a thing. So we have a single item number, and we have inventory of some that was associated with the primary supplier, some that was associated with the secondary supplier.
Correct.
Yeah, as long as that supplier, the right suppliers, is associated with the inventory record, meaning the container details screen, the inventory screen will default to only that supplier's. Meaning so if it's just the primary that's logged in, they're only going to see theirs. We have to make sure that it's configured in such a way so that inventory of the primary is going to be shown.
If you don't mind me diving in, Mark, I want to do a little testing on that. I haven't put Supplier Portal in for a number of years now where we bought the same thing from two suppliers. But one of the things that we did when I was a customer was we would buy the same metal from two places, and we had a business percentage assigned, and our MRP showed both supplier names and the business percentage, and that made our purchasing department a little bit anxious. So I would only caution you that depending on what you're going to share, make sure you log in as that supplier, see what they're going to see, and make sure that you're cool with that. It all depends on how your screens are configured.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. And as long as it's just the inventory or inventory tracking screen and the suppliers associated with the container record, I know that it will just show that supplier's inventory. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, Ken, for me, I was specifically referring to the MRP screen. So
Gotcha. Yeah.
yeah, I just want to bring that up in case anybody had another screen that worked similarly in the supplier portal.
Okay.
Any other questions? Ken, I'll tell you what, why don't you tell everyone about the next session we're having in 2 weeks?
All right. So our next session will be held on Wednesday, September 30th at noon again. In the next session, we're going to be talking operations, and we're going to talk operations, operation types, part op types, maybe learn some new tricks and consider some unused options or little used options in process routing setup. And some of those examples are pick and fab, which we've had presentations on already. We're going to talk about the setup of that, rework tools, variable BOM at the operation level. For operation types, we're going to talk about how to set up subcon, how to set up heat treat, which many of you may have never seen before, an actual heat treat module that is enabled at the operation type, weigh scale or pack to boxes. And then part op types where we can designate cell operations or scaling operations. And with some of the food and beverage folks on the call again, I'd be interested to know if any of you are using the scaling module in Plex. And we'll also talk about rework. So that is coming up September 30th at noon Eastern. And hope to see you there.
Thanks, Ken. Just want everyone to know too is what we will do in this session is advise you of costing implications of each one of those. So after the session today, I'll be finishing up this recording and posting it on our YouTube channel. Please remember that channel. Take a minute or two to watch and like our videos. Those thumbs up mean a lot to us. So even if you watched it live, we'd appreciate the props on our video. Thanks again to everyone, and we will see you in a few weeks. Good job,
All right, thanks,
Ken.
everyone. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.